welcome everyone. Now I'm Arthur from Shout Communications, and thanks for joining us today. Obviously, bear with us. It's the first time I've done one of these, so hopefully it can be informative now we get going. So I'm obviously working at my home, West London. All the rest of the team we're all working remotely as well, and we're going to look at sort of the ways in which the coronavirus has affected our company, but also the broadcast landscape and yourselves as PRs as well. So really, we're looking to this course. We'll look into kind of ways and opportunities in which you can still, during this crisis, try and place your clients on broadcast media. So in sort of less than a month, the broadcast PR, much like the rest of the world, has sort of been turned completely on its head. And whilst at the minute there may be sort of blanket coverage about COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, there are actually, contrary to popular belief, there's still opportunities on radio and television for PR clients. So in this course, we're going to look at sort of what stories and guests are most likely to appeal to broadcasters in the current climate, and we'll explain how interviews are facilitated and why you really shouldn't be ruling it out at this stage. So a little bit about the current situation that we sort of find ourselves in. So as with any kind of big ongoing story, of course, coronavirus coverage does make it very challenging to place other stories on air. As you'll be seeing, if any of you, obviously as you are, watch or listen to any kind of news on TV, radio, or read anything online, everything right now is very dominated by the coronavirus. And any story that makes it on currently in this sort of past few weeks, and for sure, you know, we kind of think in the next couple of weeks as well, it needs to some way relate to coronavirus. So if you're putting someone forward as to speak as a guest, or in some way, you know, it's got to link back to the main story and add some sort of value to the debate as well. At the moment, there isn't a huge amount of point pitching anyone in who doesn't hugely relate to the coronavirus crisis, as broadcasters won't react too well, as we found from our own experience quite a lot actually in the last few weeks. But although this is probably not what you as PRs want to hear, in general, our mood over the last few weeks has actually been positive, as it's helped us kind of take a step back from the day-to-day kind of workings and actually look at our clients from a very different angle and actually think, how can we help, or how can we sort of contribute to this debate from a broadcast perspective? And it's been interesting to kind of work creatively with existing clients, but also pitching out to new possible clients as well, sort of thinking, how can we help them in ways to kind of secure coverage on broadcast. It's a sort of different way of working for everyone at the minute, and it's obviously very strange. Obviously at the start it came as a massive shock to everyone and comes with its sort of challenges as well. But as you know, after a few weeks, things have started to calm down. We sort of think somewhat, and certainly from our perspective over the last couple of days, it's been a bit more positive. We're starting to see clients set the wheels in motion for possible campaigns, some further down the line, but others this week and sort of next, and so that is a good sign. So this kind of links us into story fatigue. So story fatigue actually is sort of inevitable, and there already is, I think probably some people may find on certain stations, there is actually an appetite for other news. So in contrast to the ongoing big story, it's actually quite nice for other stories to kind of come in and have an effect as well. So we're only 3 or so weeks into it, and I think already we are beginning to sort of see gaps appearing and slots becoming available. So definitely right now there's a feeling out there that more good news stories are needed. So any kind of quirky or funny stories that link back to it, or kind of heartwarming survival stories or great community spirit stories, I think we're starting to see them find themselves a lot more into the broadcast media at the minute as well. Particular focus in the last week or so on health, a lot of physical activities and ways in which people can stay fit at home. It's been really big. I think if you look at the huge success of Joe Wicks's PE lessons for starters, it's been a massive thing, especially with kids being at home and homeschooled too. There's a bit more of an appetite for ways in which parents can creatively engage with their kids. And we'll start to see more healthy eating and cooking stuff, I think, in the next coming weeks. And for sure, conversation's going to start shifting, I think, over the next few weeks towards mental health and the ways in which people can kind of deal with the detachment from socializing and detachment from society as well. So we sort of think of it, it's a little bit like Brexit. Obviously, given recent developments and the next couple of weeks are not going to be good at all. Coronavirus is going to be in the news, in every news bulletin, and with lives at risk, of course, it massively overshadows something like Brexit. But we make the comparison because it's likely to share a sort of similar timescale. So we're going to see the news agenda predominantly dictated by coronavirus, and we're all very aware of that. But in the amount of airtime it gets, sort of lessen and lessen, and eventually will drop down the running order. But like Brexit, we should probably expect it to rumble on long after it's all sort of cleared up. Various inquiries, investigations will go on, looking at the effects of, such a large scale global crisis as they're felt at every level. So it might not seem likely this week or even next, or, for certain people might not even be the next coming months or so, but there will be a point when broadcasters and their audiences want to hear about other news too. So now's a great time, I think, whilst people may not have quite as much on their plates or might not be as busy as they would be in their sort of day-to-day lives, to look ahead, as we discussed, sort of have a look at your client base, think about the immediate future, but also think sort of further down the line in the next coming months how you can help comment. It gives us as PRs a great opportunity to sort of think creatively and think how we can help our clients help shape the sort of post-corona world as we currently live in. So the sort of effects that we've found on coverage, obviously, it's the main thing at the minute. We're being asked by people if they're looking to go for projects, can we actually guarantee coverage? Are we seeing clients get coverage? And the answer is yes, we are still seeing clients get coverage on broadcast. Obviously, we've had sort of words come down from the BBC, for example, that they are instructing the regional stations to find good local corona-related feel-good stories in their patch. So that could be kind of, community initiatives, grassroots charity stuff, or local businesses. So it really is worth drilling down into your client list to see if you've got anyone on there that kind of would fit the bill. And we found there's definitely an appetite currently for those kind of stories. So that's very much worth thinking about on a kind of radio day level. Obviously, regional level, that's good, but on a national level, you'd expect that the sort of news agenda is being dominated quite heavily by coronavirus. But it is worth thinking about regional coverage as well. So we've actually conducted radio days Thursday and Friday last week. We secured about 14 and 16 interviews for those radio days we ran. So it just goes to show sort of it's very much still possible to run a radio day pretty much as normal, even in the current climate that we find. We also ran something last Tuesday, which was Tuesday the week before, which was the morning after we went into this sort of lockdown that we find ourselves in the minute, and we still managed to get 12 interviews on that one as well. So while that's sort of less than what we'd normally get, it's really not bad considering the times that we live in currently. So it just goes to show that all is not lost. Very much so. Whilst a lot of people are putting campaigns, and you may find that your client's putting things on pause, it doesn't necessarily have to be the case, we are finding. So we'll have a little look through those campaigns that I just chatted about shortly, and the ways in which these things can still happen remotely during this period. It's also worth bearing in mind that while you may not get as many sort of coverage hits at this moment in time as you may see on a kind of normal broadcast day, it's actually worth noting that the kind of viewing figures and the listenership of radio is through the roof at the minute. So it's kind of similar times to Christmas in the sense that everyone's at home. There's a vast number of people listening to the radio, watching TV, so much more so than normal. So definitely worth thinking about and exploring, possible broadcast days with that reach at such a high level at the moment. Yeah, someone's just said, can we put questions in the chat? If anyone wants to, I'll just have a quick look now. If anyone wants to ask a question, please type it in the chat, and I'll try and answer it when I can. Obviously, I'll leave some time at the end as well, where we can have some questions too. So, sort of what does a lockdown currently? What does it mean for broadcast PR? What does it kind of look like currently for us? So life is kind of going on at the minute, but not really as we know it. So producers of news and daytime programs have already made moves to kind of stop contributors coming into their studios. Presenters are sort of hosting programs from home as well. This is very much the case for quite a lot of radio now. So lots of even though sort of lots of journalists and broadcasters are classed as essential workers, many radio shows are being broadcast remotely from presenters' homes, and that's been the case for a week or so now with radio. And this is becoming increasingly more prominent with TV too. So people in tune with kind of watching TV stuff, you may be seeing now kind of one presenter in the studio, one presenter on a kind of remote link. That is sort of becoming much more prominent. It's becoming sort of norm at the minute as well, with these social distancing measures in place. And it's just something that we've become adjusted to, and it's part of the kind of new way of working. So not kind of today or tomorrow, but sometime in the next week or two, more gaps are likely to kind of appear in the national radio and television schedules, because broadcasters, they need to keep their audience interested and engaged. So media are going to need more than just the big story. They're going to need more than just coronavirus coverage soon. So of course, we need to know the sort of latest developments concerning the virus, but also people do need that kind of glimmer of hope and the reminder of normality too. So it means opportunities to appear on air will be there. So we need to be aware of those as well. And as I've said before, it's kind of fitness, mental health, anything inspirational, that's going to go down a treat. There's also going to be sort of appetite for professional service stories. So kind of think lawyers, bankers, retailers, even things like bike manufacturers. It's worth looking into the list of companies and services that are allowed to remain open at this time, even if your client's shut or pause or kind of furloughing workers, for example. It isn't to say that if they can't get on broadcast at the minute, they might still be used as a case study for how a business is coping during the crisis. Think kind of feel good things, quirky ways in which your client potentially may be helping. Just looking at some questions now. Zoe has said, how tenuous can the coronavirus connection be in order for it to be so worth pitching in the next week or so? That's a good question, Zoe. It's sort of, I think broadcasters and journalists alike, they're sort of wise to it as well, and they know from a kind of PR perspective, if we are just really kind of news hijacking or piggybacking onto the story, they will see through it. You do need to have some sort of connection to the story, and sort of help the debate in some way. You need to, kind of thinking, I know your sort of client-based travel stuff, that is obviously at the moment quite a tricky one because not much travel going on, but ultimately I think potentially you should be looking kind of further down the line. People will be absolutely gagging to go away, various different modes of travel and transport after this. So kind of thinking of the ways in which you can help after that. One more question. Claire has said, is there a chance that we could be seen as opportunistic by trying to sell at this time? Yeah, another good question. We experienced kind of in the first week, we were kind of operating as normal, pitching clients in on just kind of stories that were unrelated, and we did get a few bits off clients, off journalists saying, why now? And no, absolutely not. Are you joking? But over the so those kind of stories, no, kind of our standard radio days, potentially not. But we have found in the past week or so, obviously there are gaps opening, and people are warming to other stories as well. Obviously, it still has to have some sort of link at the minute back to coronavirus. So I'd say, you know, it needs to have that strong link as to appear not opportunistic. But ultimately, their broadcasters are still broadcasting. They are not in complete lockdown, so they do still need our help and still need content as well. So the ways in which we can do this, obviously, technology is the answer. As we said, people will be watching a lot of TV and news at the minute. You'll be seeing a lot of Skype interviews happening over TV, particularly Boris Johnson and you know, other journalists as well. Phone interviews for radio. Before, as we probably going very much against all our the way in which we've tried to educate clients beforehand. It's always saying that you need good quality audio for radio, always need ISDN or spokesperson in studio. Now it's not really the time for that. Radio stations, obviously with their presenters working remotely, they still need this content and they still need interviews to take place. So they're happy to take audio over any sort of way at the minute. Phone interviews, absolutely fine. There's plenty of other ways you can do interviews as well, especially if the interview's not live. So there's ways in which you can record audio on your laptop or your phone and sort of email that to broadcasters as well. So that's sort of fine. Of course, broadcasters do prefer kind of quality sound and HD vision, but more importantly, at the minute, they need a sort of wide variety of contributors, and this is their sort of compromise. So you may sort of, you know, now we're used to kind of dodgy internet connections, hopefully not this one, or crackly interviews. And while it's not perfect, you know, it's just become accepted that this may happen. And this is sort of the norm now. While sort of used to be seen a tech glitch, was kind of seen as embarrassing, a bit of a PR disaster. People are more in tune with it now. And I think as long as your spokesperson can get on and find a way of getting and conducting these interviews when you're offering out the story and the guest, then you stand a chance of making it on. So another question here from Emma Lowe. Events at the end of the year, sort of looking at September. I have a summer radio day penciled to push ticket sales. Will there be an appetite? Really struggling to advise clients. That's a good point, Emma. We've had a lot of we do a lot of radio days that are specifically sort of call to actions around events. So we did see a lot of those pulled kind of start this summer. But I think it's tricky to say at the minute because we don't really know how long or how far the social distancing measures are going to go. So I would say with events it's tricky, but we're more than happy to kind of listen to ways in which, you know, we could help speak to your client potentially around other ways in which they could, you know, they can use the budget that they possibly have creatively to try and look at other broadcast opportunities. But I'd say at the minute events is quite a tricky one, and we don't particularly work in events, so I'm not sure what the sort of timeline is for that. But there are other ways in which you could probably go about that, I think. Right, next slide. So specifically looking at radio days. So I don't know how many people watching who have kind of experienced radio days with us before, but I'll just quickly give you an overview of that. So ordinarily radio days kind of back-to-back interviews that we arrange from our radio studio, which is we're based in sort of central London and Bloomsbury. And then sort of normally typically back-to-back interviews from about 12 up to about 30 from all around the country, where a spokesperson sits in the studio and does a series of interviews over ISDN. Obviously, at the minute, that's not happening. So we are, like everyone else, we've adjusted and we're doing sort of remote radio days. And while a lot of people may think the minute, you know, potentially we aren't working as normal, very much at this stage we are business as usual, and we have found, you know, the last couple of weeks have been a challenge for everyone, but we are obviously finding a lot more work coming in over the next coming weeks. So we are now set up to kind of do remote radio days, which involve a spokesperson doing all these interviews from their home, ideally over sort of Skype or FaceTime or a landline if they have it as well. It's better than a mobile phone. And we're very sort of kind of adamant on this. We don't want people unnecessarily traveling around, and if someone's at home and they've got good connection, then there's absolutely no way in which a radio day can't be conducted. So some broadcasters will conduct interviews over mobiles with spokesperson. There's various different ways as well. Audio notes that you can record. We've got all the information we can give you if you book a radio day about how this is going to happen sort of on the day. But we the sort of way in which we do so we still organise all the radio interviews kind of back to back. We'll leave a little bit more time than normal because obviously we're kind of remote producing from our homes as well. But you'll still have a producer on the day who'll be handling all the contact with the stations and making sure they're liaising with the spokesperson and the station and making sure the interviews all run as usual as well. We've done sort of 3 or 4 of these and they've all gone perfectly to plan. And as before, people are always interested to see if they get their coverage or not. We will obtain all this audio for you and send it over in a kind of final report as well. So it's very much sort of as usual. The sound quality may not be as good, but that's, as we've said, that's become accepted now in the broadcast world. So it's sort of a standard radio day package that we are still doing, and I think people should explore it. It is sort of business as usual as well. So looking into TV opportunities. So for TV, Skype is very much the way forward at the minute. It's sort of like a down the line interview that you would have seen in the past when spokesperson is not actually in the studio. They've just got sat in front of a camera before. So the kind of big tips and things you need to think about this when kind of speaking to your client is obviously check the background is suitable. At this time it's okay for people to be working from home, but you need to avoid any kind of political or knickknacks you might have in your home that may cause sort of offence or damage, reputation, etc. You've got to raise the laptop slightly so you're looking straight into the camera lens rather than sort of down on it. Obviously a bit more flattering. And try and minimise sort of background noise or interruptions. Obviously, everyone's seen the video of the BBC interview where the kids all walked in. I think that kind of thing is now sort of acceptable, but it's good if you're doing a kind of serious interview to try and make sure that that everything is kind of working okay. If your internet is sort of weak, try and move to a place where you've got the best chance of having a good connection. But obviously, it's not the be all and end all, as we've said at this stage. And if you've got a really strong story and they want to do it a TV interview, they may still take audio, a sort of Skype audio, and just have a kind of still of the spokesperson as well. Broadcasters are thinking much like us as well at the minute. They're trying to make things work as best they can. So if we can, the most we can help them, then kind of the most chance we have of kind of getting our stories on. And Skype media training is actually a service that we've traditionally offered in the past when kind of media training clients in America and kind of all over the world as well. And so that's coming quite handy. Seeing a lot of clients asking for sort of Skype media training for their clients in the recent weeks, and I'm sure we'll probably see a lot more as well. So if you need, or if you think your client might be interested in a sort of Skype media training session, then get in touch with one of the team and we can quote for that as well. So looking at the sort of post-coronavirus, whilst sort of at this moment in time, people may think they can't really think anything other than it, there will become a time. And so, as I said before, we're kind of working at the minute to best place ourselves after the coronavirus crisis, that we are ready for the time when lots more stories can be out there. We need to think quite cleverly though, because we think sort of once this is all over, there's going to be a lot of brands and businesses, that have suspended their campaigns during these coming months, and everyone's going to start going at the same time. So I think you need to sort of think quite cleverly with your clients about, the timing of your campaigns is going to be very crucial after this. Obviously, the competition is going to be massive. So think much more cleverly about timing than probably you ever have before, I think is a piece of advice from us. Of course, obviously, it's a really challenging time, and we need to kind of monitor it on a week by week basis. And you know, as I said, we have started seeing a few more gaps opening up, and who knows that, you know, in the next coming weeks that might actually become more and more, as well, as people do get the sort of story fatigue. So I think just getting everything in place at this moment in time is probably the best thing that people can do, and making sure that you're ready to go and you have all the right ingredients when that time comes. And you know, we are getting a lot of people cancelling projects like everyone else, but also we are getting a lot of new business inquiries as well. People are sort of questioning, and there's always lots of toing and throwing about whether people should go ahead with the campaign. From what we've experienced, there is still the appetite. So we would always advise, you know, would have a chat with you beforehand, but we would always advise that you do sort of seriously consider going ahead with campaigns, because a lot of other people out there are pulling them at this moment in time. To fill you in a bit about what's going on at Shout, so much like sort of everyone else, the team are all working remotely during the duration of the lockdown. We have closed our studio, but as I said, we're sort of fully equipped to continue pretty much all of our services in one form or another at the minute. Obviously, as chatted about, the most sort of straightforward ways in which we can help through media relations, so radio, TV, and online sort of video placement services as well. We can offer, as I said, media training via Skype, and obviously something that was quite big beforehand, the sort of podcast production that's going on at the minute as well. A lot of people, you know, that is possibly something worth exploring, because a lot of people have studios set up at their homes, and you know, people are accepting less good audio at the minute. So there's sort of possible opportunities there for placing guests on podcasts or clients recording their own podcasts, because obviously there is a demand for content at the minute, and audio is a good way of getting yourselves out there. And yeah, obviously we're still running. We're trying to run our kind of workshops as usual, but obviously through this kind of webinar basis. I know we've got a lot more coming up. So just email Faye at shoutcommunications.co.uk from our team if you want to get a place on any of the other webinars we've got coming up. And you know, we're here to sort of help at any point to chat through any kind of ideas that you may have with your clients. I think the sort of takeaway message from us really is that we are, you know, it is business as usual for us, and we're here to help, and always happy to chat through potential ideas that you may have. We produced this little leaflet as well, actually, sort of about remote radio days and how it's working. Happy to send that through to everyone after this, as well as the slides as well, so you can have a better look at that. And just quickly, I will just run through a couple of the campaigns that we've done during this period. And as I say, we are anticipating sort of a couple of more projects next week as well, and more after that. So it is kind of opening up a bit for us as well. So we ran a couple of radio days last week. One was for Mecca Bingo, and one was for BT, so Skills for Tomorrow. They both used, as you see, kind of celebrity ambassadors, and we're able to secure sort of 14 and 16 radio interviews for these. So they're sort of normal radio days. Obviously, we'd hope to secure more, but it just goes to show that, you know, with the right spokespeople and the right stories, things can still happen at this time. So always think about that. And this another radio day we launched on Tuesday last week, the one I mentioned about, when the morning after we were put on lockdown. So this is a sort of annual report that we do for a client of ours called the AIA, which is the Asphalt Industry Alliance. They release an alarm report which looks into the kind of state of the nation's roads. This is a particularly sort of topical one, because it's normally positioned at this time to come out after the budget and react off the back of the government funding towards roads, and particularly potholes as well. And you know, this story normally gets huge amounts of coverage, but it's a very challenging time. We're still able to get sort of 12 interviews for this in this current climate as well. So we are experiencing, obviously, less coverage potentially at this moment in time, but it's definitely worth, people exploring further, these opportunities, because as I said, the kind of reach of these things is much higher than usual. So I will throw it over to anyone. If there's any questions, pop them in the chat, and I can take them from there. Obviously, we are always happy as well. Shout to answer any questions. Give us a call. I think the phones are diverted to our mobiles, and we're happy to be contacted over phone or email anytime that anyone wants and has any kind of queries about how we can help. Karen's just said that Radio 4, that pothole story actually got on the Today programme as well. So there is good coverage out there available. Twice. Right, does anyone have any questions? Claire's put a question there. Any suggestions for when lockdown is lifted, going to be a real bum fight, and how long do we think that will last? Good question. That's sort of personal opinion. I think the original lockdown goes up until next Sunday, doesn't it? Easter Sunday. I think it's probably going to be extended from Easter Monday for another 3 weeks minimum. So we'd still obviously look into doing kind of remote radio days in that time. So the competition is going to be as it sort of is right now. So nothing particularly different. I think once the lockdown gets lifted and everything sort of starts getting drip fed back to normal, I think you will see a bit of a bum fight. There'll be lots of competition for airtime, because obviously lots of people are going to be going with campaigns, but also through that will still be lots of coronavirus coverage as well. So the best way to make your clients stand out is to kind of have a real good think about it now, come up with the best story possible, the best spokespeople, and make sure that your story stands out once everyone is sort of going at the same time.